This is the French Canadian Legacy Podcast. I am Jesse Martineau. Now, since Mike and I have started this podcast, one of the coolest developments in the Franco-American world has unquestionably been the Young Franco-American Summit. Now, for anyone who may not have caught the past episodes where we have talked about this, it is a gathering of young Franco-Americans, and they have presentations, and they just simply get to be in each other's presence, which is very, very cool. And as this is such an amazing event, I have absolutely no issue with talking about it whenever we can. Now, this year's event took place the same day as Putsinfest, and I have two people who were in attendance that day to tell us more about it. Daniel Moreau is the man behind the amazing Dawson YouTube series. It is the driving force for this Young Franco-American event. And we will also speak to someone very well known to listeners of this podcast, a member of the French Canadian Legacy team and the woman behind the terrific Modern Franco's blog, Melody Desjardins. Daniel and Melody, welcome back to the French Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us again.
Now, I said in my intro, this was the same day as Putsinfest. Can you tell us where it took place and how you ended up at that specific venue?
It took place in Manchester in the Millyard Museum. We basically spent the whole morning doing presentations, networking, that sort of thing. Then we kind of individually moved to Putsinfest in the outskirts of Manchester in the afternoon.
Yeah, so how'd you guys end up at the Millyard Museum?
I think it was just by chance. We wanted to go somewhere that was meaningful to Franco-Americans, and we knew we wanted to go to Manchester. Several weeks of searching, we ended up deciding on the Millyard Museum.
Yeah, so the whole idea at the first Young Franco-American Summit was, how about we have this thing move around everywhere, just pick up new locations and get more people involved. And so it came to figuring out where we're going to hold the second one. And I mean, why not New Hampshire, obviously? So, Manchester was an obvious choice there. Nashua was also a great Franco-American spot in New Hampshire. But yeah, we decided on Manchester ultimately, and found a great spot in the Millyard Museum. I mean, pretty much the perfect spot, I would say, in Manchester. And yeah, a nice crowd showed up, took a group photo, and there are 17 of us in that photo. So I'd say that's pretty impressive. I believe at the first one, there were 12 of us, maybe 14. But this second one, we definitely had more people attend.
Awesome. So trending in the right direction. Now, did you guys actually get to tour the museum at all while you were there?
Absolutely. Because we rented out the space for the museum, it was offered to us for a rather low price. It's always a really good experience to tour that museum. I've been there probably twice.
Oh, cool.
One time was my first visit to Manchester. The second time was kind of touring around right after viewing the museum space. And then, of course, after the summit, I toured it again. And the people behind the Millyard Museum and the Manchester Historic Association are just fantastic. And, I think we owe a good part of the success of the event to them as well.
Very cool. No, that's super excited. Did you guys get a chance to stop in the gift shop?
Not me personally.
Yeah, and I've been there before. Actually, the first time that I stepped in the Millyard Museum, I went with you, Jesse. So I remember seeing the gift shop and just seeing all the amazing books. Being able to walk into a gift shop and see books that say Franco-American on them. I mean, that was just I had never experienced that before. Honestly, you'd think that that's not a big deal, but for me to see, Franco-American history, Franco-American this in a gift shop was just amazing. So
yeah, I think I counted. This is why I mentioned it, because I think last time I was there, I think I counted 6 books that were either written by Robert Perrault or he did the forward for, something like that. I think 5 of the 6 were his. It was awesome. It is very, very cool to go to that place. All right, can somebody tell me about some of the presentations that we had this year?
Yeah, so we had about 4 regular presentations, and then we had a keynote. We had some presentations like the barns of northern Maine in the Acadian St. John Valley, where the Acadians live in Maine. Oh,
Who
shoot.
did that presentation, by the way, about barns and
Oh,
Acadian?
Joey LeBlanc. Joey LeBlanc was the one that did the presentation on the barns.
Cool.
And Sibel Grise did the presentation on, I want to get this right, Le Patrie Français, I think, which is was a Franco-American record label in Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
Melody Desjardins, who did a presentation on traditional costumes of Franco-Americans and what we might adopt into our current culture. Megan Murphy, who did her presentation on representation of Franco-Americans within the classroom, and using her experiences as a Gen Z / millennial who grew up in a Franco-American household and subsequently brought that teaching and what her experiences were into her classroom and just ended up inspiring a lot of students and helped realize that there's a thing called Franco-American. It helps them identify. And there was, of course, the keynote by Claire Marie Brisson, who talked about the hyphen in Franco-American, what that means, and the weight that the hyphen carries. It was incredible. We had her last year as a regular presenter, and she was just so good that we brought her back as a keynote.
Melody, real quick, before we go on to anything else, we mentioned what your presentation was about. Now, I recognize that as being one of the many articles you write as part of your blog. What made you choose that as something you wanted to present, as opposed to all the other things you could have presented on?
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people, I don't know, either people love the idea or they are very confused by it. And actually, when we were planning this Young Franco-American Summit, Daniel actually was like, "Hey, do you want to do something about all this like costume and traditional dress that you talk about?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually." So I didn't think I would, take on that idea again for this, but I thought it would be a good way to just bring it to a live audience and not just another article that I could post on the blog. So yeah, and I had dug more into the subject, and I started finding all of these French Canadian folk dance groups in Quebec primarily, and so I thought, well, they wear all these different dance costumes, and I thought, well, they probably just make any kind of costume like a lot of dance groups do nowadays. And then I started finding that some of these dance groups do dances from all around the world. So they'll have like different cultural costumes and they'll label which country those costumes came from. And I kept seeing in their photo albums that they would label Quebec as one of these places that these folk costumes came from. So I thought, okay, well, if they're labeling this costume is from Poland, this costume is from Brazil, this costume, etc. They were labeling some of these costumes as being from Quebec, and some of them had specific locations. So began digging into these locations a bit more, trying to find the exact inspiration behind these costumes. And unfortunately, I didn't find a lot, but that enough just sparked my interest in bringing this topic up some more. And yeah, I was able to just talk about these different folk dance costumes and just find the similarities in all of them. And who knows if they are directly inspired by some remote area of Quebec. I mean, there's some inspiration in there. I can't quite find where that is yet, but whether it's like a modern spin on it or if it's directly inspired from somewhere, I still think it's really interesting. And it's just something it's really I've always really been interested in how different cultures express themselves in terms of dress and what they wear for ceremonies or dances. So it's just something that's always interested me.
What happened to you guys after the event? What'd you guys do?
After the presentations, we did the museum tour, and then the event just kind of officially ended, and we all just drove over to Poutine Fest. So I ended up getting there actually a little bit later than some other people, but I got there, found some parking. It was really easy to get into. Obviously, I had my ticket. Just walk in, get a T-shirt, get your swag bag, and then you hop over to the place where they have all the poutine, and oh, so many samples. I could only eat like two and a half.
Was this your first time, Daniel, at a Poutine
Yeah.
Fest? All right.
Yes.
What were your thoughts then when you walked in and saw that show going on?
I've never seen that many Franco enthusiasts and just general appreciation of Franco-American culture in one place, outside of the context of just trying to get back what was lost. Because the other festivals and gatherings I've been to, it felt like they were trying to grab a hold onto something that was already dead. And the thing that I really appreciate about Poutine Fest is that it's very much alive, and it very much feels like a festival that I want to go to. And I can't really say that about a lot of festivals in general.
Yeah, so this is the second Poutine Fest that I've been to. Last year I had an amazing sample of vulgar display of poutine because it was gluten free.
Sure.
It was so good. I was immediately hooked. I finally understood what was so great about poutine. I had never had it before. I never grew up with it. And so this year, unfortunately, I didn't see anything gluten free. Maybe I missed it, and please reach out to me if you have gluten free poutine. And I got there a little bit later anyway because I had gone home to have lunch because I just kind of figured, well, I don't know if I can eat anything there. So one day maybe I'll enter the Poutine Fest game with my own gluten free poutine.
That would be terrific. I mean, good luck on manning the fryolators, though. I think it's a heavy job.
I'll figure it out.
Sure. Now, all right. And did anybody do anything after Poutine Fest?
I just went back to my apartment and laid down.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of us hung out in Manchester. That was really cool. So we kind of toured some of the Franco-American sites, went to St. Marie's and the Ferdinand Gagnon statue in Lafayette Park. And even though Jesse had given me his grand Franco-American Manchester tour before, it was just cool to go back there with a group and just talk about Franco-American stuff.
Cameron Martin tour guide this time.
Yes.
And what I thought was pretty cool was I was able to connect with some of you because we even went out to a restaurant in downtown Manch even after that, which was an absolute blast. That was a really good time. All right. Well, this is a cool event because I think that interaction, that social, like, because we obviously communicate a lot through, social media or whatever, but to be able to have that in-person interaction, there were some people like Cameron Martin, who I've talked to 100 million times over the computer, but this is the first time seeing actually in person. So yeah, no, I think that kind of thing is a really, really important part of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just fun to get a table somewhere and just have a bunch of us. I don't know, maybe we're all just kind of crazy, but the table that we had in New York City when we had gone to that event, and this time in Manchester, just get a bunch of us at a table, and everyone's just having different conversations, but it pretty much all lines up to something Franco-American related, something Quebec related, and it's just an amazing time.
It sounds like another successful Young Franco-American Summit. What is the future looking like for this summit? What are we thinking about going forward with this event?
As of a few weeks ago, I resigned as head event organizer just because it was getting a lot for me, and I was looking for someone to take a hold of the reins, and none other than Melody took them on. And I don't think I could be happier with who the reins ended up with, because I know it's going to thrive a lot in her hands.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting just how the Young Franco-American Summit moves location. I think it would be really interesting if we had different people take on head organizer. Just not like every single year, just kind of whenever. I don't know. Maybe we should do like term limits. I don't know, but whenever the current head organizer decides, like, you know what, I would rather pass this on to somebody else because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of time and energy, of course. And so I just kind of thought, all right, I'll take it this year. I think that'd be really, really a great experience, and I could put my own kind of spin on it. And then I don't know, when I feel like it's time to pass it down, I hope that there'll be somebody there to take it over, and they can do their own spin on it and move it around to different locations. Yeah, I think it would be a really good experience for young people to have that experience of hosting an event and organizing one. So I think that would also help put that on a resume. So I think this will be a really good opportunity for us younger people to socialize. I mean, we are a bit more into the digital world than people who are older than us. So I think it'll get a lot of young people outside of, like what you're just saying, meeting up in person. It's great to meet people over social media and talk to them and everything, but it's a whole other thing when you can actually see them in person and have a conversation. And so with the Young Franco-American Summit next year, yeah, I will. I will do my best to throw another great event.
Yeah, you given any thoughts of when or where it would be yet?
Well, definitely keeping the October time. That's just such a nice time in New England.
Beautiful.
It's not too cold, not too warm. It's just perfect. So yeah, I don't know. And maybe in the future, if it's in New Hampshire again, we could team up with Poutine Fest again, and because I think that having the two events in one day, I think it worked out really well. I thought it was awesome, and that'll get more young people to go to Poutine Fest. So I think the future is bright for the Young Franco-American Summit.
And the good thing about it being in Merrimack, obviously Manchester is super close. It's also super close to Nashua if you want to do there, or Lowell. It's actually really close to Lowell if you wanted to have it in that as well.
I do want to mention that we have an official Discord server for planning the Franco-American Summit and also the Young Franco-American Summit community. We have a small little server that's maybe only half a dozen people right now, but we're looking to expand it to everyone um, who will most likely end up coming to a summit event, and also and it will provide a place where people can kind of chime into the planning process. And in fact, one of our hopes with it is that we can have more people come on to the planning process as a whole, to our committee. And I think once that, like what Melody was saying, with eventually finding someone to take the reins off of her hands, I think hopefully by then we're going to have even more passionate young Franco Americans in the process.
I just wanted to say real quick about the Discord. Yeah, just reach out to us if you're between the ages of 18 and 35, or you'll be between the ages of 18 to 35 by October of next year. And yeah, I mean, if you're interested in just attending, that's okay. But yeah, I would love people to volunteer and uh, join me in coming up with some ideas and the planning process if they'd like to get involved in that. Yeah, just feel free to reach out to us, and we'll get you in that Discord.
Well, it sounds like this year was another incredibly successful event. Congratulations to you guys for pulling this off. Again, the idea is amazing. I think it's absolutely terrific that this exists. And the fact that it keeps growing is incredibly encouraging. And it really is throwing it in the face of all those who keep saying that Franco-American culture is either dead or dying. Because obviously we get finding more and more young people who have a true passion for it, and you guys are a big reason for that. So congratulations again, talking to Melody Desjardins and Daniel Moreau. Thank you very much for joining the podcast.